In this video, I'm going to show you how to assemble the baby's bonnet. As you can see, this baby bonnet is slightly larger than the previous one, so it'll fit a larger baby. This doll should be anatomically correct for a newborn. So as you can see, this bonnet will fit a much older baby. So I reckon about between 1 and 18 months. So I'm going to show you how to assemble the bonnet, what I exactly do and why, and how I decorate it. So here are all the crocheted pieces of the baby's bonnet, and it's time to assemble it. One of the things I do is I mount the main body of the bonnet onto material. In this case, I've chosen a very fine gauze. What I tend to do is when I go to a charity shop, I find odds and ends and I recycle them to use for my projects. So the reason why I am lining this bonnet is so that it's easier to maintain. If you sew the crochet onto a piece of cloth, it'll keep its shape easier when you wash it, and it's less maintenance, because in its natural state it'll shrivel up when you wash it, and then it needs to be ironed. It'll still need to be ironed, but it'll be that little bit easier to do. So what I do is I pin the bonnet to the material. You can use any kind of material you want, if you want to make it matching colour, or if you want to give it a silky look or a satin look. So I pin it to it, and then with a simple running stitch, so not a back stitch, just a simple running stitch, I stitch the crochet onto the netting, and I make very, very small stitches, so a stitch of about 1 millimeter into the crochet and about 2 or 3 millimeters into on the back side for the gauze. Gauze is easy to work with because it's very easy to trim afterwards, so you don't really need to make a hem on it. Once you've sewn it on, you can easily just trim with a pair of scissors and it'll stay and it won't unravel. I'll show you that when I get to that. Now for the edge, what I do is I take a very fine ribbon. I've got one in a matching colour, and I'll just feed it through the top. You don't have to do this, but I do think it looks nice when it's done. So as you can see, this is a very fine ribbon. On my previous bonnet, I used a wider piece of ribbon, but I folded it in two. It was that little bit more difficult to get through, but it still worked. So what you do with the ribbon is where you start and you just weave it in so you weave it along the top, and then it's ready to sew on. A few other things I've got is a ribbon to tie the bonnet up with, again a similar colour, and I've also got a few beads and 2 little roses that I attach to the side where I put the ribbon on. These little roses are exactly the same roses as the one in the square, and these are just simple little bracelets I found again in a charity shop. I found the gold with the kind of purpley and greens and yellows will look really nice with that bonnet. on the white bonnet I chose little pearled ones. I find it just gives a nice finish to the bonnet. So I'll get going sewing. So for sewing thread, I'm using the same cotton as I used to make the crochet. So it'll be exactly the same. And I just put a double knot at the end. You don't have to, you can sew it firmly, but this will leave less of a mark. Like I said, you don't really have to line the bonnet if you don't want to. I just find it easier afterwards to maintain it, to keep it. So like I said, very, very tiny stitches, so about 1 millimeter, and then a couple of millimeters at the back. That's all you need to do. Just a simple running stitch. When you look at the back, it'll barely be visible. We'll be stitching the edging to this piece when it's finished. So I'll work along. And I'll show you when it's finished, how I trim it. So here's the bonnet sewn onto the netting. And one of the reasons I use netting is you don't need to put a hem in. And it's very, very easy to trim. You go right up to the edge and just cut along. And just remove all the excess netting. You don't need to be worried about it unraveling because it just doesn't. That's why it's the ideal material in my eyes. So you just go around the bonnet and trim it. As you can see, it leaves a really nice edge. And you work your way around. So I've trimmed off all the netting, and now it's time to attach the edge. So I'll turn it round. And here's the edging. I fed the ribbon through. So as you can see, it really does look pretty with the ribbon. And I'm going to place it, but I'm going to make sure that the right side's facing up, so that when it folds over, it'll be the right side on the edge of the hat. So I'm just going to put a few pins in. As you can see, I'll be able to go in a zigzag from one stitch to the other. This edging can be used for lots of different things, for petticoats or bottoms of blouses or hats, anything really. It's quite a pretty little edging. So I take my needle and I'm just going to zigzag along. And that way I'll be able to attach the edge to the hat. So I've attached the edge, and as you can see, it really brings it all together. I do love having the ribbon in there. So the next step now is to form the hat, and all you need to do is fold the corners here and just put a few stitches in. If you want to make the hat larger, you can always add a little bit of ribbon between these 2 points so the hat can grow with the baby. And here it's now shaped as a hat. So as I said, you could always put a little bit of a ribbon here in between if you wanted to make the hat larger. On the one I did previously, I did add another row. So I crocheted another edge onto this, and looking back now, I'm not going to do it, and I'll show you why. Because it's curling up, it's not lying flat, and it's only going to be just something more to worry about when you're maintaining the hat. So I'm not going to bother with this one, but you can. So this one has just got a picot and a little bridge, alternate all the way around. So you would just crochet that on to that row here. But I'm not going to bother with this one because, as I said, it's only just going to add to the maintenance. So now we've got the hat. This is the ribbon I chose. I'm going to have to attach it here. And I'm going to make it quite long so that it can always be shortened. One thing I do is I always slightly heat the edge so that it seals off. So the first thing I need to do is secure this little bit of ribbon because I don't want it to pull loose. I'm now going to cut the ribbon and secure the larger ribbon. Now I can do this on top because I'm going to place a little flower on top of that. So it just needs a few little stitches. I'll put a little knot to secure it. And now I'm going to attach this little rose just there. So I've attached a little rose, and now I'm going to sew a few little beads inside of the rose. So these are just little bracelets that I buy in charity shops, and I make sure I have lots of different colours and shapes, and I just think these look pretty. It's not really difficult. It just, the only problem is sometimes the needle's too thick for the bead. See, that's one that's a bit too big. You just bring it the thread up and you just fill the whole center of the rose with beads. So this is the bonnet finished. So as you can see, the little rose with the beads and the ribbons. It's a really pretty little thing, and I'm sure it could become a future heirloom. I hope you enjoyed this, and my next video will be a progress report on the christening gown.